Hello and welcome back to the Electronic Intifada's live stream for Thursday, July 23rd. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman here with my colleagues Ali Abunimah, Jon Elmer, and Tamara Nassar. Asa Winstanley is off today. It's day 1021 of Israel's genocide in Gaza. Coming up, Dorotea Gucciardo joins us from Gaza, where she is supporting healthcare staff as part of her work with the medical solidarity organization 𝐓𝐡𝐞. She'll talk about stark realities and struggles people are facing, as well as some of the ways she's seeing them show resourcefulness and joy amid the ongoing genocide. Later on in the show, Jon will cover the deadly Iranian missile and drone strikes targeting U.S. bases, soldiers' barracks, and missile defense arrays. And the Yemeni armed forces expand a naval blockade to Bab el-Mandeb and the Red Sea. But first, let's take a look at the news. Here's a brief summary of some of the latest developments this week in Palestine and Lebanon. Israel has carried out massacres on multiple families this week in Gaza, killing Palestinian children, men, and women, as the army encroaches on more land and squeezes Palestinians into smaller and smaller areas. On Wednesday, an Israeli drone strike on a tent sheltering displaced people killed a Palestinian and injured several others west of the Nuseirat refugee camp in central Gaza, according to medical sources. 13 Palestinians were killed in a series of Israeli attacks on Tuesday, including a strike on a home in the pre-dawn hours that killed 6 members of a family in Gaza City. The Cradle reports that Firas al-Masri, his wife Salsabil, and their 4 children, Naim, 13 years old, Feryal, 11, Salma, 9, and Amira, 6, were killed while they were sleeping. The Israeli drone strike engulfed the entire home in flames, and rescue crews say they found the bodies so completely burned that identification efforts were extremely difficult. The explosion also forced residents in surrounding areas to flee in search of safety, while shrapnel reportedly reached nearby displacement camps, piercing tents housing displaced Palestinians, the Cradle added. Palestinian civil defense spokesperson Mahmoud Basal reported from the wreckage of the home, holding a piece of the loitering munition, a so-called suicide drone, that hit the building. He said the residents were burned alive and added that rescuers could hear them screaming and begging to be pulled out, but all attempts had failed. The civil defense has warned repeatedly that Israel's deliberate targeting of their vehicles and equipment, along with the scarce amount of fuel and lack of spare parts to repair damaged or worn-out vehicles, has made rescue efforts like these nearly impossible. Videos circulated on social media showing civil defense crews pulling the charred remains of bodies, some of them small, out of the building in the aftermath of the strike. 4 Palestinians were killed in a separate strike on Tuesday, also in Gaza City, when an Israeli missile targeted the entrance to the Muslim Young Women's Association building. They were identified as Mohammed al-Hawari, 46, Jihad Azam, 37, Subhi Sakala, 34, and Abdullah Joha. The Israeli army targeted a car in the central Gaza Strip, killing 2 Palestinians identified as Ra'ed al-Amasi and Nabhan al-Amasi. Video footage, which we will not play here, shows passersby and rescue workers pulling the blackened remains of 2 bodies from the smoldering vehicle. And Aya Ubaid, whose husband Mohammed was killed in an Israeli attack days before in Gaza City, died of wounds she sustained in that strike. On Monday, Israel targeted the Yemen al-Said hospital, which has been turned into a displacement shelter in the Jabalia refugee camp in northern Gaza, killing 2 and injuring at least 16 others, mostly children, in a so-called double-tap strike. The Wafa news agency reported that Israeli warplanes fired 2 missiles at the first floor of the building, one after the other. A woman's body was torn apart in the attack. A boy who was injured in the attack says, quote, "I can't even speak due to everything we saw. I lost my cousin. I was injured and he was martyred, not from the first strike, but the second one. They bombed a car. I pulled myself away and kept walking. I hadn't even gotten there when the street was bombed again.
مش أول قصف الثاني ورا رايح قصفوا عند الغفر السيارة سحبت حالي وضلت ماشي لسه ما بوصل قصف الشارع.
That was filmed by reporter Bilal Fuad. On Monday evening, the local Wafa news agency reports that one person was killed in an Israeli drone strike targeting an electric bicycle in the central Gaza Strip. Israeli artillery shelling on tents for forcibly displaced Palestinians in Al-Mawasi Khan Yunis killed one man, Osama Abu Tayyam, on Sunday. 10 others were wounded, according to local reports. Dropsite News reported that a woman was killed and her daughter and several others were wounded in an Israeli artillery attack in the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 neighborhood of Gaza City. And the bodies of 2 more Palestinians were brought to Al-Shifa Hospital after Israeli attacks the previous night. Also on Sunday, Aisha Mahmoud al-Arja, a 6-year-old girl, was shot by Israeli soldiers in Al-Mawasi Khan Yunis. Witnesses said Israeli army vehicles had opened fire toward tents sheltering displaced people. 5 members of the Nesman family were killed in an Israeli airstrike in Gaza City on Saturday. Adham, 42, his wife Marwa, 40, and 3 of their children, 8-year-old Arwa, 16-year-old Ibrahim, and 18-year-old Yahya, were killed, leaving their 13-year-old son Ayham the sole survivor because he had been at a nearby market buying food for the family. Reporter Nahed Hajjaj filmed Ayham in shock and grief, standing over the bodies of his parents and 3 siblings later in the day on Saturday. Local reporters filmed the body of his 8-year-old sister Arwa being carried by rescuers to a nearby hospital, her limbs torn from her body. I will not show that footage here. A 16-year-old boy was shot and killed by Israeli soldiers in Gaza City also on Saturday. Reporter Salah Judah filmed the child's father grieving over his body on the floor in a hospital. On Friday, Israeli forces carried out a massacre on a funeral procession in the Nuseirat refugee camp in central Gaza, killing at least 7 Palestinians and wounding more than 20, according to local reports. Medhat Salah, who was wounded in Friday's Israeli strike on the funeral procession, told Dropsite News' Abdelkader Sabah that he was heading to a relative's wedding when he passed the funeral for Suleiman Farajallah, who was killed in an Israeli airstrike on the camp earlier in the day when the attack happened. Salah said, quote, "We couldn't have imagined they would bomb a funeral of this size. Many children, women, and men. People have become afraid to walk in the street," he said. And a 49-year-old mother, Amani Abu Jazar, was shot and killed by Israeli soldiers in southern Gaza on Friday, leaving behind her daughter, who was approved for medical evacuation, but was still waiting to receive treatment outside Gaza, according to the Wafa news agency. In addition to the massacres, airstrikes, and sniper attacks on people across Gaza this week, the Israeli army continued to carry out heavy demolitions of entire neighborhoods on the eastern side of the so-called Yellow Line. The United Nations High Commissioner's Office said this week that more than 9 months after the announcement of a so-called ceasefire, quote, "still nowhere is safe for Palestinians in Gaza." The office's spokesperson, Tamim Al-Khitan, added that the line is constantly being moved, quote, "presenting a continuous threat to life as the Israeli military appears to routinely fire on Palestinians for mere presence in the vicinity of that line, in violation of international human rights law and international humanitarian law." Furthermore, Israel has been quickly constructing earthen berm and trench systems hundreds of meters beyond the Yellow Line, steadily increasing its seizure of Gaza's land to more than 60%. Satellite images published this week also show the establishment of at least 3 new military bases. The Gaza government media office stated this week that, quote, it has become clear that the Israeli occupation is using the yellow line as a cover for a creeping policy aimed at isolating and destroying vast areas of the Strip. The latest field data indicate that the restricted areas have expanded to consume about 65% of the total area of the Gaza Strip after it was estimated at 53%. Over the past few days, the media office added, we have observed a dangerous advance of military vehicles and yellow concrete cubes in several axes. In the central governorate, the yellow line was moved to a distance ranging between 300 to 350 meters to the west, which led to the confiscation and bulldozing of agricultural lands and residential homes belonging to Palestinian families and placing other homes a few meters away from the occupation army's barracks. The government media office remarked that, quote, the expansion of the occupation is not limited to the theft of land, but it is accompanied by direct, bloody terrorism. Approaching this line has turned into a death sentence, as field and international reports documented the killing of 23 martyrs in just 1 week, between July 13th and 20th, near the line. As of today's airtime, the Palestinian Health Ministry in Gaza says that since the so-called ceasefire in October 2025 was declared, at least 1,185 Palestinians have been killed. We'll have more on Israel's ongoing confiscation of land in Gaza later on in the program. Turning to the occupied West Bank, Israeli soldiers and settlers shot and killed 2 Palestinians during a raid on the village of Deir Jarir near Ramallah on Sunday night. The Palestinian Health Ministry said that Auda Farahna, 53, and Ahmed Abdul Abu Mugh, 26, were killed and several others were injured in the attack. Local sources told the Wafa news agency that Israeli occupation forces also opened fire at an ambulance transporting one of the injured Palestinians to the hospital. The Guardian newspaper reports that Israeli settlers from a nearby colony outpost arrived after 9 p.m. on Sunday, quote, claiming that they were searching for stolen livestock. Israeli soldiers and police soon joined them, protecting them as they sought to take several villagers' sheep by force. But when villagers raised the alarm and a crowd gathered, soldiers shot 2 men, beginning a night of 3 successive raids by settlers from nearby outposts and Israeli soldiers that lasted until after 2 a.m., according to Palestinian residents of Deir Jarir. In interviews as they buried the 2 victims on Monday, family and friends of the dead Palestinian men described several attacks each month in which they said settlers, backed by Israeli forces, arrive in houses on the outskirts of the village and then steal livestock. It's a partnership between the army and the settlers, Adel Rashid, the father of the younger victim, Ahmed Abu Mugh, told the newspaper. Quote, Rashid said local settlers on Sunday had stolen 21 of his sheep, while 50 more had been taken from another member of the village. Video of Sunday's incident showed a settler protected by 4 Israeli soldiers in green camouflage leading a sheep out of a local house, The Guardian reported. A 17-year-old child, Fadi Hamdallah al-Nassan, who was shot by Israeli settlers attacking his village of Al-Mughayr near Ramallah on July 11th, died of wounds a week later on Saturday, July 18th. Fadi was a member of the Palestinian national youth football team and played for the local club. Al Jazeera reports that dozens of mourners carried his body from the Palestine medical complex in Ramallah to Al-Mughayr for burial. The Palestine Football Association said that Israeli forces shot Fadi in the thigh while settlers were attacking the village. His leg was later amputated and he died from the injuries. The association said in a statement on social media that with Fadi's killing, 1,103 Palestinian athletes have been killed by Israel since October 7th, 2023. 568 of them, more than half, were football players. His father, Hamdallah al-Nassan, told Al Jazeera that his son had run toward the scene after hearing women and girls screaming during the settlers' pogrom and was shot. Fadi's mother, Hanan, said, quote, "He was a good student, good in sports, and loved playing football. Everyone loved him." On Saturday night and into the early hours of Sunday, dozens of masked Israeli settlers attacked the village of 𝐓𝐡𝐞. The Israeli lynch mob set fire to the mosque, 2 houses, a dairy factory run by women, and a vehicle, and smashed windows and sprayed graffiti on the walls of the mosque, spraying them with the Jewish Star of David and the word revenge, according to reports. A local Palestinian activist told reporters that the attack unfolded, quote, "in full view of the Israeli army, with a military watchtower located next to the mosque and soldiers providing protection for the settlers." The United Nations Human Rights Office says that since the beginning of the year, and as of last week, it has documented more than 1,260 incidents across 250 Palestinian communities involving Israeli settlers that resulted in casualties, property damage, or both, averaging about 6 attacks per day. This week, a teenager from Jenin died of gunshot wounds he sustained from Israeli forces more than 3 years ago in March 2023. The Wafa news agency reported that Ashraf Mahmoud Najib Farahati, 19 years old, was shot in the head and had been receiving prolonged medical treatment in hospitals in both Palestine and Jordan ever since. His family told Wafa that Fadi died in Jordan, but they will bury him in a cemetery in Jenin when his body is returned to Palestine. 4 Palestinians were killed and 23 were injured during that attack by the Israeli Army's Special Forces unit on March 16, 2023, which took place inside a shopping area in Jenin. The Palestinian Center for Human Rights described the massacre at the time as a criminal, gang-style extrajudicial assassination campaign targeting Palestinian resistance fighters. In Lebanon, our contributor Roqayah Chamseddine reports that Israeli attacks have continued across the south. She filed this report for the Electronic Intifada on Wednesday evening.
This is Roqayah Chamseddine reporting for the Electronic Intifada. Lebanese President Joseph Aoun met with U.S. President Donald Trump at the White House on Tuesday as Washington pushes forward a trilateral framework linking an Israeli military withdrawal from parts of southern Lebanon to the deployment of the Lebanese army and the disarmament of Hezbollah in designated so-called pilot zones. Trump pledged to help Lebanon a lot, but offered no concrete timetable for a full Israeli withdrawal. Aoun, meanwhile, told Trump that Lebanon's objective is to end the state of hostility with Israel permanently, while calling for U.S. support for the Lebanese army. Trump also said he was willing to speak directly with Hezbollah if Aoun believes such talks would be useful, while raising the possibility of Syria playing a direct role in confronting the resistance movement. Despite all of this rhetoric, the meeting produced no clear guarantee that Israel will fully withdraw. At the same time, the U.S.-backed framework is already being tested on the ground. The Lebanese army has begun deploying in designated pilot zones in southern Lebanon, including Zawtar al-Gharbiyya, where it is conducting operations to clear unexploded Israeli munitions. The deployment has also exposed the limits of Lebanese sovereignty under the current arrangement. Israeli forces opened fire near Lebanese troops after they moved toward an area outside a so-called agreed deployment zone. No injuries were reported, but the incident demonstrated that Israel continues to determine the boundaries of movement and Lebanese military activity on Lebanese soil. And despite the diplomatic language surrounding the framework, Israeli aggression against Lebanon has not ended. Israeli occupation forces continue to occupy large areas of southern Lebanon. They are carrying out demolitions, and they maintain military installations along the border. Lebanon's health ministry said on the 20th of July that the cumulative death toll from the Israeli aggression on Lebanon since March had reached 4,328, with 12,230 people wounded. Prime Minister Nawaf Salam visited the devastated town of Zawtar al-Gharbiyya, raising the Lebanese flag and calling for a complete Israeli withdrawal from Lebanese soil. During his quick photo op in the town, he did not speak to a single resident. The scene on the ground underscored the contradiction at the heart of the current process. Lebanon is being asked to expand state control over the south, while Israel continues a relentless campaign of aggression and occupation. The question now is whether the U.S. brokered framework will actually lead to a complete Israeli withdrawal, or whether Lebanon will be pressured to make irreversible concessions while Israel retains control not only over the terms of the process, but parts of Lebanon itself.
That was Roqayah Chamseddine reporting for the Electronic Intifada from Lebanon on Wednesday. We've published many features in the last week, but today we're highlighting excerpts from The Closer the Yellow Line, the Closer Our Displacement by Hassan Herzallah, writing from Gaza. He writes about not being able to fall asleep on a night in early June because of the incessant drones buzzing over his displacement tent in the Mawasi area of Khan Yunis. The sound of the drones is then drowned out by another, more terrifying sound, tank treads, inching closer to where they were sheltering. Hassan writes, quote, "My brother Mohammed didn't go back to sleep, and all my attempts to convince him to do so were in vain, because the sound of tanks kept roaring from a distance. We both stayed awake, listening apprehensively before dozing off into a fitful sleep. When I woke up at sunrise, news had spread across the camp about the new yellow-painted concrete blocks now present in 𝐓𝐡𝐞 area near our camp, marking a new expansion of the Israeli military zone. Just the day before, other displaced people from a nearby camp had to flee as those yellow markers were placed closer to their residence. When a military zone moves overnight to just a few kilometers closer from where you are living, the distance between yourself and the danger becomes real. This danger, whether from shelling or random gunfire or just proximity to the Israeli army, is when you start to wonder if you will be forced to flee yet again. Within a few hours, all the conversations in our camp were about the Israeli yellow line. I hadn't seen this yellow line in person, but I saw its effects on people's conversations. 9 months after the pseudo-ceasefire, Israel has continued to expand its military control inside the Gaza Strip. On May 28th, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu directed the army to seize 70% of the Gaza Strip, which the army seems to have achieved. This means that Palestinians cannot access about 2/3 of Gaza and are being pushed into a very small area because of these yellow concrete blocks. The conversations were contagious. I started thinking whether our tent would be far enough from that danger and whether we needed to relocate or not. My family and I lived those initial days in constant fear from the frequent random tank gunfire, but we remained where we were and did not move our tent since there was no place to go. 2 days later, after midnight, my phone screen lit up. My friend Ahmed was calling. Ahmed Asfour is 30 years old, and before the genocide, he worked as a beekeeper and farmer on his small farm in eastern Khan Yunis. I don't know where to go, he told me. We were forced to flee from our tent due to the mass bombing and the approaching Israeli military. I don't know where to go. Can I come and stay with you until dawn? Ahmed asked. I spoke about this to my father, who instantly welcomed Ahmed and his family to our tent. After around an hour, Ahmed came with his wife, brother, and his ill mother. His family spent the night at my siblings' tent while Ahmed stayed at my tent. After he pulled himself together, he told me how he and his family were sleeping in their tent when, around 12:30 a.m., a big explosion shook the area and everything turned red. Children were running, mothers were screaming, and no one understood what was happening, he told me. Ahmed and his family fled the tent with whatever they could grab. We had been forced to leave our homes long ago, he told me with frustration, and today we were forced to leave even the displacement camp. Despite their camp now being a dangerous place, Ahmed took his family and returned because they have no alternatives. I check up on Ahmed regularly, and he's afraid of another round of displacement, just like the night when he called me. I share Ahmed's worries, as do my family and our neighbors in the camp. Every day, the same conversations of getting displaced again because of the Israeli yellow line are circulating in the camp. As long as Israel keeps expanding its invisible yellow line, there is no guarantee that the place I am living in now, the tent, may remain tomorrow. The yellow line is not just an arbitrary marking on the map. It is a new way to measure the distance between our tent and new rounds of displacement. Those are excerpts from The Closer the Yellow Line, the Closer Our Displacement by Hassan Herzallah, writing from Gaza. Read more on electronicintifada.net. And now, as we always do, we wanted to highlight people expressing joy, determination, and reclamation across Palestine and around the world. Hamada Shu's videos of preparing delicious food at community kitchens in Gaza always go viral for good reason. This past week, he created videos of himself making barbecued seafood with fish and shrimp that he and his team caught in the sea, as well as crispy fried chicken, all for the community in Gaza's displacement camps. He also made an enormous fruit salad, what he calls the ultimate fruit pool party, served it with ice cream, blueberry sauce, and pistachios, and distributed the sweet treats to the kids in the camp. The kids remark how delicious and refreshing it was.
سلم عندك وزاكية البوزة زاكية كثير سلطة فواكه بالآيس كريم بتجنن باخذ العقل كثير زاكي مركب اشي فاقد زاكية كثير تاخذ من الاخر كنا ميتين من الشوم البوزة بردت علينا لذيذة بسطنا كثير.
That's Hamada Shu on Instagram. And that's it for the news roundup. As always, go to electronicintifada.net for much more, especially to read our new features by our brave writers in Gaza. You're watching the Electronic Intifada live stream. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman with my colleague Ali Abunimah. Hi, Ali.
Hi, Nora. How are you?
I'm hanging in there. I don't know.
We're all trying to.
Yeah. Another brutal week. And completely absent from any headlines in corporate media, completely absent from any attention still, nearly 10 months into this fraudulent, we can't call it a ceasefire anymore. I don't know what is this, a continuous fire.
Yeah.
So here we are.
It is, but people in Gaza are, as we're going to hear now as we speak with Dorotea Gucciardo, dealing with a horrific reality, but they're also showing incredible resourcefulness. And I gained so much insight from this conversation with Dorotea that we had yesterday because of the difficulty. In fact, we had a couple of false starts getting the connection to Gaza, but in the end, it turned out pretty good, as you'll see. So shall we go to that now?
Let's do that, and then we'll be back.
All right. You're watching and listening to the Electronic Intifada live stream. I'm Ali Abunimah here with my colleague Nora Barrows-Friedman. Since the October 2025 so-called ceasefire was declared, Israel's genocidal slaughter has continued unabated, killing 1,170 Palestinians in Gaza and injuring 3,800 as of today. Hospitals remain in ruins or are barely functioning. Hundreds of thousands of forcibly displaced Palestinians remain in tents and other makeshift shelters without any infrastructure. And the Israeli army is entrenching its control of more than 60% of Gaza's territory. The Associated Press reported this week that Israel's military is building a giant earthen barrier alongside the so-called Yellow Line, continuously expanding the area of stolen land in Gaza. AP says that more than 23 kilometers have been constructed in recent months, running through Palestinian communities demolished by the military. That's the equivalent to more than half the length of the coastal strip. The barrier also includes a so-called security zone around the Yellow Line, equipped with intelligence and technological assets, according to the AP. Meanwhile, dozens of extremist Israeli lawmakers and settler fanatics, including government ministers Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich, took part in a march through a closed military zone toward the Gaza boundary on Sunday to demand the re-establishment of Jewish settlement colonies inside Gaza and to support the ongoing genocide of Palestinians. Joining us to talk about the current situation is Dorotea Gucciardo. Dorotea is currently back in Gaza as part of her work as the development director of 𝐓𝐿IA, a medical solidarity organization based in Canada. She has been working to support healthcare workers and has written and spoken extensively about that work. Dorotea, it's so good to have you back with us on the Electronic Intifada live stream.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so happy you are too. Thank you.
So, Dorotea, Israel continues to escalate its slaughter of children and their families in Gaza with, of course, the full support of Western governments and full impunity. Nearly 10 months into this so-called ceasefire, talk about the mass casualty events that are happening over and over again every day and how medical facilities are trying to cope with the sheer scale of these massacres while having fewer and fewer supplies and resources to manage them. You work to support healthcare workers. Walk us through what an emergency department looks like now in Gaza and what doctors, medical workers, and their patients are facing.
Yeah, sure. So the mass casualty incidents are happening still every single day, even though we're told that there's a ceasefire. As you mentioned earlier, there are still Palestinians being killed. I think for the last 5 weeks, we've had about 18 airstrikes every single week. And that's not the only level of violence. We are also seeing the naval boats out on the sea. They are shooting at Palestinian fishermen. I see the bullets ricocheting off of the waves. There are Israeli snipers located on these berms that they're constructing that is basically closing the Gaza Strip in more and more. So daily we're seeing these acts of violence being perpetrated against Palestinians who are then brought into these emergency rooms that for all extents and purposes are no better off than they were in October of 2023. They still lack the most basic supplies in order to treat these patients. The only reprieve that they have is that the frequency of these strikes has lessened. So we are thankful for that, and they themselves are also quite thankful for that. But in addition to these mass casualty incidents, what they're also seeing in the emergency rooms are patients who are coming in that haven't been able to access healthcare for the entirety of the genocide. So you may have had somebody, for example, in 2025 have a heart attack and not be able to access the treatment that they needed because the hospitals were in a constant emergency response. And so doctors are now seeing these patients coming in who for the last year have had the ill effects of not having that treatment. So these patients who may have had a heart attack are now suffering from heart failure, from respiratory distress, in addition to everything that they're experiencing from the brutal, brutal conditions of having to live in these tents, especially in the heat of this summer. Now, I myself have visited these hospitals, but I've also visited those tents. So one of the services that we offer is wound care services, and our team, we have volunteer nurses who have been going to the tents in order to treat some of the wounds that Palestinians are suffering from. And I've seen firsthand that where I think we're at this stage of the genocide is the the start of the consequences of the violence that we were seeing last year. So, for example, one of the patients that we visited was a man who he was 41 years old. He visited a GHF food aid site, and if we all recall, the GHF was the so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, this militarized aid structure that was designed to replace the United Nations, where all they did was use food to bait starving Palestinians to come, where they were then shot at. Um, this man was a victim of one of those shootings. He became paralyzed along his left side. And so for the last year, he has remained immobile in a tent in Han Yunis. He has bed sores on his body because he doesn't have regular treatment for somebody to come and to help heal these wounds. And that's one man. We know, and the Ministry of Health knows, that there are thousands of such Palestinians that are currently living in their tents, suffering daily from the effects of the violence from months, years ago, and up to today, that can't access the healthcare in the hospitals because they can't get to the hospitals, either because they themselves are immobile from these injuries or they have obligations. They are women, for example, with young children and no one else to help them care for them. And so the levels of the effects of the violence are widespread, not just in the hospital, but out in the community as well.
Yeah, and there's the confirmed death toll of 73,000 from direct Israeli attacks since October 2023, according to the health ministry in Gaza. But what you're talking about is the unknown number of what's called excess deaths, people who are suffering due to disease, due to prior injuries, lack of medical care, lack of basic medicines, starvation, toxic pollutants in the air, psychological trauma, prenatal, fetal development problems, etc. And so I mean, you talked about wound care as one of the services that 𝐓𝐿IA and other international, medical solidarity organizations are taking care of. But when it comes to like diagnostics and treatment, the basic machines, the basic supplies are completely depleted or at very low stock, including chemotherapy drugs. A few weeks ago, we published a feature about how there are only 2 working CT scanners for an estimated 1 million people in northern Gaza. Can you talk about this like compounding situation of injuries and deaths from direct attacks, but then also this larger humanitarian crisis, the consequences that you talked about, and how we can assess the impact of not just the last 3 years of genocide in Gaza, but over the last 20 years of siege on Gaza?
Yeah, the CT scanner is interesting to me. I was actually at Rantisi Hospital a few weeks ago. This is located in Gaza City, and it was besieged in July, I believe, of 2025. And the Israeli soldiers literally shot the CT scanner. There's no rationale for this other than pure hatred. And so that CT scanner is one that exists in Gaza, but is out of service because it was deliberately destroyed. And they have assessed it. Multiple biomechanical engineers have assessed it, and there's basically this motherboard piece that needs to be replaced. It's maybe the size of a briefcase. If they had that piece, they could bring in another CT scanner into working condition that could then treat some of these patients who don't have access to it because of the lack of supply. And so the main obstacle here is Israel. The obstacle is the blockade, the occupation that decides what can go in, when it can go in, how much can go in, and it just isn't enough. The injuries will continue to be compounded, and the diseases will continue to fester, and people's conditions will continue to get worse without access to even the most basic supplies, let alone those with chronic conditions or illnesses that require specialty treatments. In addition to the multiple patients who have experienced heart attacks, physicians are also seeing those with cancer who have not had access to the treatment that they needed, and the cancer is now metastasized. It's gotten worse, and frankly, they're in terminal stages. There's nothing that can be done. But it's important for everyone to remember that it doesn't have to be that way. This is all entirely intentional. This is completely by design. We're not looking at an earthquake or some tsunami that has hit an area and everyone is devastated and scrambling, trying to figure out what to do. We're talking about an empire that has decided that this violence is going to take place in this manner on these people. And it's entirely political. And so it's something that even though we're being told there's a ceasefire, there isn't, and we need to be angry about it and continue to be angry about it and to speak out against it, because Palestinians are suffering while we're debating the terms of ceasefire. It's completely absurd.
Dorotea, I often think about, you're talking about catastrophic problem upon catastrophic problem that people are trying to cope with. And as you rightly emphasize, that this is all by design and intent, none of it is necessary. All of it could be eliminated in days or weeks if there was the will to do that. But in this context, I often think about older people or anyone really who might have chronic issues that in other societies would be easily managed, high blood pressure, diabetes, dialysis, through common medicines that are available all over the world. But without those medicines, these can become life-threatening situations. What is the situation of so many people like that in Gaza? Do people have access to, leave aside for a moment the catastrophic care that they may need because of genocide-related injuries, just the ordinary medicines people need to get through life? What's the situation now? How are people coping?
The situation is bleak. The situation is absolutely bleak. I was speaking to the head of Nasser Hospital recently, trying to get a sense of what was happening at that specific site. And he said that, we see aid come in, we hear about aid come in, but there's a psychological trick, he said, that the Israelis play. So, for example, they received a truckload of anesthesia medicine that he said, in theory, should be able to last 5 years, that they should have received a full supply of anesthesia drugs. They all expire within 6 months. And this is something that is been happening to the Gaza Strip even before this genocide. And it's not just Israel that's to blame. It's donors that are also to blame. It's governments that send in things that are nearly expired, or things that aren't necessarily needed, or things that are proprietary and can't be used here. So patients, for example, who have diabetes and are given machines to test their blood glucose, but once the strips run out, that's it. Like, you can't order them from the supplier. It doesn't work that way. And certain strips don't work on all machines. So the basic medical supplies are not coming in. If medicine is coming in, it's not always what's needed. It's not enough of what's needed. And as we saw with the case of Nasser Hospital with the anesthesia drugs, they're also next to or already expired. And so it's an untenable situation for patients in Gaza who have chronic conditions. The will exists here. The Palestinian doctors here are doing everything that they can. For example, when there was an outbreak of GBS last year, Guillain-Barré disease, I don't know how to pronounce it, but GBS, it's when the autoimmune system attacks itself. There was an outbreak that required very specific treatment. It's a reversible condition. One of the symptoms of GBS is paralysis. It creeps up from the legs and moves upward and essentially paralyzes the respiratory tract. Through working in collaboration with some of the INGOs and by being very creative with the equipment that they had here, they were able to find the filters that they needed as part of the treatment process and manipulate the machines that they had here, because they didn't have the proper machines, in order to create a protocol that could treat these patients and thereby reverse the paralysis. And that was through sheer ingenuity of the Palestinian doctors here, who are very well attuned to have to work in conditions where they don't have access to the equipment that they need. But for the patients who don't have access to the medicine, their opportunities are quite restricted. Once that medicine runs out, they're left with virtually no options. And what's compounding their ill health, remember too, is the lack of nutrition. So we do see some fresh food coming into the market. It's prohibitively expensive. This is a population that for almost 3 years now has not been working. And so the majority of the population relies on aid, which is not being allowed in to the quantity required and needed to sustain the population. And instead, we see commercial products coming in, largely from Israel. And so if you want to buy yourself some chocolate bars, some sugary cereal, pop, you have an abundance of options of cookies, of anything sweet and devoid of nutritional elements. So the population is suffering from lack of access to adequate food, and don't forget lack of access to adequate water. The Israelis have routinely attacked and taken out of service desalination sites. And so the ability to access fresh water in Gaza to produce fresh water is quite limited. We also have a lack of fuel coming in, so powering this machinery is also quite limited. So the daily existence for someone in Palestine, whether they have a chronic condition or not, is dire. It's frankly, it's a miserable life. It's a very, very difficult life. And if I could just add one thing too, for me, it's the effects that I see on children. I know that you're asking about adults with chronic conditions, but what I'm seeing for the children is absolutely and utterly heartbreaking. You know, in one commute that I took from the place that I stay here, the Glia Center, to hospital, I drove by children scavenging in a garbage site looking for plastic. There's a specific blue plastic that they use here to burn for fuel because they don't have access to it. I drove a little bit longer, and there was what could not have been more than a 2-year-old girl walking with her hands above her head like this, and she was holding on to one of those big water jugs that they bring to the water trucks in order to fill it up. And this 2-year-old, she was hunched forward with this bottle balancing on her back, so her back would take the brunt of the weight. And I burst into tears, if I'm being completely honest, because it's a sight that we should never see, this little child struggling to carry this water. And then I arrived to the hospital, and the first patient that I'm greeted with was a 1-year-old boy who suffered a shrapnel injury in his back. The layers of skin and muscle had just been scraped away because this shrapnel had literally burned through his flesh, and the nurses were trying very carefully to clean it. And he's crying and he's screaming for his mama, who's not there because she was injured in this attack and she's at a separate hospital. This was one day. This was a 25-minute drive, and that is a typical sight to see on that commute. And so, and on top of that, all of these children who haven't been in school for 3 years, you know, the damage that this genocide has wrought on the youth of Gaza is immeasurable, in terms of their daily living, their health, and their capacity for growth. I'm devastated by it. It's devastating.
Yeah, of course it is. It's unbearable to try and make sense of. Taya, the last time you spoke to us, you were from Gaza. You were there in November 2025, a month into the so-called ceasefire. And you talked about what you called a living necropolis as a way to describe the vast erasure of all landmarks and skylines that the Israelis have replaced by rubble, or rubble that has been cleared away, completely erasing what was there. Can you tell us about how that landscape has changed and is still changing since last November, and what you saw when you entered Gaza this time? Tell us about these just immeasurable catastrophes against the backdrop of a shrinking landscape across Gaza.
Yeah, it is a shrinking landscape. The first thing I saw when I came in, of course, was a devastated Rafah. And what stuck out to me most as I was coming through was actually the yellow concrete block that they used to demarcate the yellow line, which is just so offensive. This marker that's supposed to tell Palestinians that it's not safe if you cross it. What does that even mean when they're still being attacked every single day? Like, what does that border even mean? It means nothing. But what we are seeing, so anywhere you are in the Gaza Strip, you see, you feel, and you hear the Israelis. You see them on the coast. It's this beautiful coastline, and you can stand there and you can look into the distance. And when you look into a horizon, you're supposed to be able to imagine things, what's beyond that horizon. It's supposed to elicit these feelings of hope. And then this shadow of a boat starts to appear, and you realize, like, oh, there they are, and they crisscross in the water, and they're coming closer and closer toward the shore, and they're murdering Palestinian fishermen every day. You see it, you hear it. You hear the drones in the sky. You see the drones in the sky. There have been multiple airstrikes that have happened in this area, literally just a street away. And these sounds reverberate. They shake you. The space that I'm in, it felt like the whole building inhaled and exhaled from the airstrike. I can't even imagine what it would have been like to be even closer. And then when you're walking anywhere or driving anywhere, you see the Eastern Line, which is defined by these tall berms that the Israelis are constructing, by these communication towers that they're building between them. And every Palestinian knows that there are Israeli snipers on those berms and that those guns can reach all the way to the coast. That didn't exist before this genocide, because the population, and I think this is worthy of reminding everyone, was already one of the most densely populated places on Earth. Well, they built upwards, right? We had these buildings that were built upwards that could house multiple families. Those buildings are gone. And so not only can you see the Israelis and you know that they're watching you at all times, and they are striking and targeting you at all times, you also have no space to go. There are tents literally along a pier, all the way to the tip of the pier, as if the population is literally being pushed over the edge. Where else are they supposed to go? We were calculating the other day that there's probably about 15,000 Palestinians per kilometer in what's left of the area they're expected to live in the Gaza Strip, because the Israelis are pushing everything closer and closer. And when we talk about death tolls, and we talk about trying to understand impact and how many people have been affected by this or killed by this, we will never know the number of bodies that remained behind that yellow line. How many of them have had buildings collapsed on them and then were bulldozed and cleared away, or have had these berms constructed over their bones? We will never know that. But we do know that this presence is constant, and it's impossible to hide from at this point. And it's terrifying. The impression that I get from most people now is like this feeling of trepidation. It's just constant trepidation. Because even though there's supposed to be this ceasefire, you're never ever really feeling safe. You're always feeling threatened. Always. I will say, I went to the Catholic Church that's in Gaza City. Its name at the exact moment is escaping me. It's the only Catholic church in Gaza City. Back in November, a mother and her daughter were no, that's the Greek Orthodox. Yeah, then there's a Catholic one. The Catholic Church was the one where in November of 2023, a mother and daughter were shot by a sniper when they were in the courtyard of the church. And last year, almost to the day, there was a missile strike that hit the building. And so actually, when I was there, they happened to be commemorating 3 people who were killed that day. But I was speaking to the priest afterwards, and he was telling me that for the first time since the start of the genocide, he was taking the entire congregation to the beach. They had rented these buses, these big tour buses that they could find in Gaza. Their children were so excited. They were running around with their little swimsuits and their kites. They were really happy to get to the beach. And he was looking, and he had that look. Like, there's this thing that people communicate here without even having to use words. And I knew that look. I said, I hope that it goes well. And he said, I hope so too. And what we were both saying without saying it was, I hope nobody gets shot. when you are on the beach. And that's the reality of every single day in Gaza. You don't know still if you're going to get hurt because the threat of violence is ever looming.
Listening to you, it is overwhelming, and just to imagine the daily stress people go through just trying to survive. Even if they're not facing the worst circumstances in Gaza, nobody is living in a good situation. But people there also are showing a lot of resourcefulness, and you've talked about that, the resourcefulness, the ways that people try to solve problems on a day-to-day basis, including your uh, colleagues in healthcare. And
Mhm,
recently, you visited a man who built a home out of clay with his own hands.
mhm,
And at 𝐓𝐿IA, the medical support organization that you work with people who are designing and building medical devices. Tell us about this. What does this day-to-day resourcefulness look like in Gaza right now? And how much is it able to mitigate the worst effects of this deliberate, ongoing infliction of suffering and deprivation?
mhm. Yeah, this house was actually a really interesting example of this. The day that I visited this potter, it was about 35 degrees, and the minute that I stepped inside this home that he is building, the temperature went down instantly. So, in terms of mitigating the environment, the clay that he's working with, the clay that is so unique to Gaza, it's doing it naturally in that sense. So he's providing himself with a shelter that is perhaps more stable, that will hopefully be more comfortable and also more temperature controlled than what you would experience in a tent,
He's
where when
even
you
got the
enter it,
flower pots outside?
yeah, yeah, he was joking. If you'll see on the side, there's a window, and he said, sometimes I sit by this window and I can see my tomato plants, and I imagine that I'm in Italy. That window there. Um, and the way, I've seen examples of this in other ways too. It's not unusual, for example, to see let's say a cafe or a business literally emerging from the rubble. Like the rubble becomes part of the foundation. And so the way I've kind of been interpreting this is through the lens of recomposition, because what I'm seeing, at least with Palestinians in Gaza, is they're taking the materials that exist, they were constructed materials that have been destroyed, or materials like this clay that he's pulling from the earth, and they're recomposing it into the life that they can live under these circumstances. Um, it's not quite repair, because repair suggests that there's like a steady supply chain that they're working counter to or against. It's really it's its own thing, that they're taking this material and making something different out of it. And for this potter, he was saying to me, I made my stove, right? He made his kiln, and then he had the idea, why can't I make this house? And if you see that gray patch of clay there, he's also created a substance that allows for it to become resistant to water. And so he was showing me, he was pouring water on it and he was scratching it, and it wasn't having any impact on the structure. And then he poured on the clay itself, and the clay immediately started to rub away. And he's done this using the knowledge that he has about the substance of the clay, about constructing clay, and using the resources that he can find in the market, and trying to manipulate these new products that can help elevate his own living condition. And frankly, I think this is marvelous, but this is also a story that is one of immense both ingenuity, but also violence, because he's living in an area where the quality of the clay is not so good. He's further west. He's toward where the sand is, and the sandier the soil is, the worse quality the clay is. The best clay, he tells me, is behind the yellow line. And so this man is going to the yellow line with a donkey cart. He is passing the line. He is taking as much and shoveling as much clay as he can, as quickly as he can from the surface, bringing it to his donkey cart, and then bringing it back to his home. Like that's what I say. The violence permeates. It's literally everywhere. He's doing this at great risk to himself, but he's trying to better his conditions. What choice does he have?
Hmm. That's an incredible story, and adobe, which is a form of construction using bricks made out of mud or clay, is obviously very ancient. And even the word adobe, which is used in the United States, comes from Arabic, atub. And so people are recovering or relearning or re-emphasizing these skills. That's incredible. It may not provide the tens or hundreds of thousands of shelters that are used, but it's certainly something. Are there other examples of this kind of resilience that you're seeing in day-to-day life, or this kind of resourcefulness that really stand out for you?
Yeah, there was one moment that particularly stands out to me. To be honest, it wasn't from this particular rotation. It was from November, but I see this type of thing repeated. I was in Deir al-Bala, which is the location that I'm in now. I was visiting a market, and it's a very busy market. There's lots of chatter. There's vendors selling things. There's a water main that's broken, so you're like jumping over this water, trying not to get your feet wet. I rounded this corner and there was a vegetable stand. And in the corner of the vegetable stand, there was a cardboard sign hanging from a string that immediately stopped me in my tracks, because in the middle of this sign was the GHF logo. And I thought, wow, what is that doing here? And so I approached the vegetable stand, and on the back of this cardboard sign, the vendor had written all the different ways that people could pay for the goods. They could pay by cash, they could pay by e-transfer. He even had a bartering system set up. And that moment stuck with me for a very long time. And I think about it frequently now. And it's taken me a bit of time to contextualize it. And the way that I see it is that this cardboard sign that he cut out wasn't an accident. He had the GHF logo, Gaza Humanitarian Foundation logo, perfectly centered. It was on purpose. And on its own, this cardboard sign could have remained forever a symbol of the depravity that organization practiced, right? A symbol of all of the death that they wrought in Palestine. But he transformed it into something completely ordinary, right? This is post-ceasefire. The GHF Foundation was gone. And there's this Palestinian fruit vendor using this sign to tell his people on his land how he's going to sell his produce. And to me, it was this moment of reclamation, right? Where he's saying, you're not here anymore. This service of empire, this mechanism of control is gone. This thing that was supposed to take over everything is gone, but I'm still here. And so he took this symbol that could have forever remained that reminded us of depravity, and he made it his own. He reclaimed it. He turned it into something else. And that's what I'm seeing on repeat every single day that I'm walking through Gaza, is Palestinians turning things into something else. They're recomposing these things into a life that is their own, on their own terms. And I don't mean to romanticize by any means, but these are, to me, small acts of reclamation. They are small acts of resistance, and it's a very good reminder to me that small acts of resistance matter, that they contribute to the culture, they contribute to the narrative, and they keep the community going. That man with that fruit stand and that sign was providing sustenance. He was keeping that community going. And those are the types of things that I'm seeing, these small acts of reclamation and resistance.
And speaking of romanticizing or romance, let's say, people in Gaza are still getting married.
Yeah.
They are getting married. Yeah. So I have a wedding hall down the street here, and there's music every evening, and it's really wonderful. And unless I'm trying to sleep, I put the earplugs in. But I have a friend who opened up his own wedding hall, and he called it a new beginning. And I just thought that's really wonderful. And he said when he opened it up, it has booked until October. And so I think to myself, there are certainly moments that we feel hopeless, but that's a choice. It's a choice for us to feel hopeless. Palestinians don't have that choice. And they see something, the birth rate is also going up, worth noting. They see something that is worth working towards. And we too need to continue to see something to work towards a more just and peaceful future. Because if they're not stopping, then neither should we.
That's a beautiful note to end this discussion on, Dorotea. But before we let you go, how can people learn more about the work that you're doing in Gaza?
Sure. They can visit our website, which is glia.org, GLIA.org. They can visit us on Instagram, so at @glia_INTL. We're a small organization. We're doing a lot of work. So, and we're doing our best with social media, but we're trying to update as much as we can. But if they do want to learn more, they can also reach out to us at info@glia.org, and we're happy to have a conversation with anybody at any time.
Thank you so much, Dorotea Gucciardo. You are in Gaza, and you are, of course, the Development Director for GLIA, a medical solidarity organization based in Canada. And we are so delighted to hear about the work you're doing in Gaza with your colleagues there amid a very difficult situation. But you've given us a few reasons for hope and to keep going and to never give up and to never stop talking about Gaza. Thank you so much, and the best of luck to you, and I hope you'll come back and talk to us again soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, it's always so just such a privilege to be able to talk to her. Every time she's in Gaza or working with colleagues, in North America who are working with people in Gaza, I always think about the revolutionary patience that we all have to exercise. It is an exercise to be patient and to have a bigger view about the situation, and it is an antidote to hopelessness and to despair, and the things that are so easy to fall into when we see what is happening day after day after day after day in Gaza. To be able to remind ourselves that people in Gaza know how to survive, and they know what the term resourcefulness means, and they are, like Dorotea said, like, not to be romantic about it at all, ever, but to have, to be standing shoulder to shoulder with people who are facing down the most depraved enemy of this century, and to do it still with dignity and with pride and with creative imagination for their people and for their communities. It's so important to remind ourselves of that.
Yeah, but it is so hard. I mean, I get messages from people every day in Gaza. I think many of us do, that the situation's not getting easier, and people do feel they're being forgotten. And so just, if you are in touch with people there, if you have ways to help them, support all these projects going on. The Samir project is one that, they've helped a lot of people. A lot of our viewers are aware of all these different things. And if you are already in touch with them and support them, don't stop, because the genocide hasn't stopped. And that's what I want to say, is that we're by ourselves, we're not the solution. We can't mitigate all the impacts of this genocide, but we do need to be there for people as much as we can, as long as it takes.
Yeah, there's the Samir Project, there's the Middle East Children's Alliance, there's Lifeline for Gaza, there's all of these organizations.
And we can't say, give to this group or give to that group, but we can say, educate yourself about these different groups, and if you feel that they're a fit for you, they have resources out there where you can find them and learn more about them.
Exactly. Yeah, and again, and we didn't even get into it with the interview with Dorotea, but what 𝐓𝐿IA has been doing is 3D printed medical devices, and what they're working on now, something that's been engineered by Palestinian orthopedic surgeons and engineers in Gaza, are these external stabilizers for people with broken bones in their limbs. They're called fixators, and it's looks like a cage kind of over your leg or your arm to stabilize a bone when there are few resources for routine surgery, for example. So they've come up with a way to mass produce these external fixators using 3D printed materials and scrap plastics, and it's unbelievable how much ingenuity is in Gaza, is in the work of these engineers and these medical students. People are still going to medical school, studying for their medical exams in tents, and to be able to learn more about that work is really important as well. So as Taya said, 𝐓𝐿IA.org, GLIA.org, and you can go there and learn more about what they're doing. Let's bring Jon on. Hi, Jon.
Hello. Yeah, it was great to see Taya. Great work.
Yeah.
Always great work by 𝐓𝐿IA.
Yeah. Incredible to always talk to her. Pivoting now to U.S. empire in West Asia, in terms of the escalating U.S. attacks on Iran and Iran's escalating retaliation. Give us a sense of what's been going on.
Yeah, I mean, they're fighting a war that the United States can't win. So we're seeing that week on week. You're going to see it again this week, and I imagine next week it'll be even more. So not sure the trajectory of the Trump administration or the White House on this, but they're getting bad advice if they're escalating.
Yeah, no kidding. Ali, are you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine. Got something in my eye.
Okay. Sometimes the grief just comes out, so it's okay. Escalations in the Gulf. What else can we say about the of course the U.S. Is now claiming, right on cue, as we all predicted, that Trump is like, oh, Iran is begging us for another round of talks. How can we interpret this?
I think it's very unlikely that's the case. And if it is the case, the terms are going to be better for Iran than they were the last time they negotiated. So that's something that the White House is going to have to digest at some point in this. There's not going to be a better deal on the table than there was before. Iran has shown that that's not, they don't negotiate that way. They negotiate professionally, properly. And, this like Trump, attention span of an hour, I don't think it's going to get it done.
Yeah, no kidding.
Especially on the detailed things like the nuclear agreement and all that kind of stuff.
He'll actually have to read the next deal before he signs it. If
so
Iran agrees to anything. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, he signed it electronically, right? So we've all had that experience where you have to scroll through the terms of
he
service.
didn't read the terms.
No, you just
and then just
goes
click
up,
the check mark. I think that's what happened when he signed it electronically.
Yeah. I think it was less than 800 words total too. So it's like they
It's
tried to make it.
They did. They hired a psychology team to help draft the MOU so that Trump would understand what he was getting into. It's
no
amazing.
More than 2 sentences for each item.
Incredible.
I mean, we laugh, but it's just so we don't cry.
Terrifying. All right, Ali, you want to do the honors?
Take it away, Jon.
All right, you are watching and listening to the Electronic Intifada. I am Jon Elmer. This is the Resistance Report on day 1021 of Israel's genocide in Gaza, day 146 of the U.S.-Israeli war on Iran. We'll start with the maps, but as always, I'm reporting this on the afternoon of Thursday, July the 23rd. Here's the map of everything that we're going to be seeing today. We have two blockades now, blockade of the Strait of Hormuz choke point and the Bab el-Mandeb into the Red Sea choke point by the Yemeni armed forces. You can follow the Red Sea up there into the Suez Canal and into southern Israel. We will get to Yemen after, but let's look at this next map because we're going to start this week in Jordan. And here's a map of the site of the 17 principal bases that have been battered throughout this particularly these last 2.5 weeks. The Americans are bragging about 12 straight nights of attacks. The Iranians respond to each and every one of those attacks. And you can see the bases. So Jordan, right underneath the O of Jordan there is Muwafaq al-Salti. That is an airbase, key strategic airbase that the United States has been using both as a shield for Israel, but also to project over to Iran for this war. And I started tracking this base before the war even started because we were seeing the buildup on that base. There wasn't enough room on the tarmacs on the aprons for all of the American fighter jets that had been taken to Muwafaq al-Salti Air Base. So we're going to start with that today. And the first video is going to have audio in, and I just want to warn you that the sound is loud. We're going to watch a ballistic missile land at Muwafaq al-Salti. So if you have your headphones on, be prepared for what it sounds like inside a U.S. military base when an Iranian missile hits you. So that is the chaos after a Friday strike at Muwafaq al-Salti. It was one of a number of strikes on that base. The U.S. admitted that 3 people were killed, although they did it in a very odd way, saying 2 people had been killed and 1 person was missing. And that missing person only was identified yesterday, 5 days after the attack. So that gives you a sense of the carnage, I believe. That's the only way you can confuse persons and body parts. The roll call didn't show someone was there, then you know the person that's missing. If somebody's in the infirmary without body parts, then you know, So the fact that they didn't know if it was body parts or a person until yesterday is really telling about the chaos of that strike that the Americans are just simply lying about, although they were pressured after those first deaths, because that's when the American media immediately wakes up and says, like, oh no, soldiers have been killed, so therefore we have to pay attention to casualties. The U.S. has been hiding these casualties throughout the war in a way and lying in a way that I think makes the Israelis even blush with the way that they have been doing it. Although the Pentagon admitted that there's been at least 100 casualties since July 7th, which is when the ceasefire crumbled. Let's take a look at one of those strikes at Muwafaq al-Salti. So you see these are strikes recorded by American soldiers, and this is really the only way we can get this kind of footage. I know a lot of people ask, why can we see on the ground footage? Well, this week we have on the ground footage. This next one has audio in as well. So that's taken from outside the wire. You can see they're on the other side of the fence, but watch this one here coming in, and you can tell that it's coming for them because of the trajectory of it. You see how it seems like it came from the bottom. So these are very significant strikes, and the warhead on these weapons is comparable to the warheads that the Israelis and the Americans dropped themselves. The Mark 82, Mark 83, Mark 84, 2,000-pound bomb, 1,000-pound bombs. The warheads on these Iranian missiles are comparable to those, and you can hear that just in the thunder after the strike and the way that fills the area. So this gives you an idea when we're showing these the launches of these missiles, what it looks like on the receiving end. And we appealed to American soldiers to send us more videos of what it's like on the inside, because obviously the people that are in charge are taking the lives of these soldiers not very seriously, and that they are wounded and don't seem to be counting them, doesn't seem to be relevant. So maybe we can get more of these videos from American soldiers sending out what's actually happening, because their government and their military is lying about it. Let's take a look at number 6, because you can see the damage on these bases. We're starting to get this kind of damage report again. This is the SOAR atlas that I've been telling you about over the last few weeks. Because of the way that the atlas operates with layers, each map is, they're calling it 3D, because each map is layered and you can add layers to the map. And that has made this censorship that the United States is going for fail, because we're able to use these maps to build out what is different in each satellite image and track it to its location. As you can see here clearly, we're looking this week particularly at the targeting of barracks. Soldiers' barracks were the target this week. Soldiers' barracks and hangars. And again, these are now what we saw in the early weeks of taking out all the radars, the significant long-range radars. This week, we're seeing that as well, but we're also seeing bases being targeted now. Base housing, which you see in the bottom left corner, being targeted. You're seeing the aprons of hangars being targeted, which means you're hitting planes, you're hitting drones. So this is a significant escalation by the Iranians, and it's a part of the degradation of the missile defense array that the Americans and the Israelis have. That's been picked off. And you saw a report here, there. I've been reporting on it every week of the taking out of these radars. These radars are significant. They're long-range radars that make massive gaps in the missile defense array. And that is what's going to lead to these strikes hitting more often. We can look at the next one, number 7 here. You can see these are the airplane hangars here, and out on the apron. The apron is just the name for the parking area that you see in front of those shelters. If we look at the next slide, you can see direct hits on those. And you can also see, if you look in the left side of the screen, you can see 2 MQ-9 Reaper drones, and they're generally parked straight. And you can see that anytime you look at the satellite images. And so those have been blown off their squares. They're presumably, for sure, the one on the right is done. What the status of the one on the left is, they're getting these Reaper drones in the air with air defense systems, and they're getting them on the ground. And the number of these destroyed MQ-9 Reaper drones is significant. The Americans are trying to buy back a bunch that they sold to other countries, because they're just losing them in battle. Let's take a look at the next slide here that could show the same thing with a bit of movement, so you can see the erasure of that hangar. So maybe that hangar is empty. Maybe they're all empty, and we can do that through this entire show. Maybe all of these bases that are being hit, maybe there's no soldiers on them, but that's just not the case, because all of these bases are protected by air defense crews at the most skeletal posture that they have. Is their air defense crews are still on these bases. They use these shelters for their air assets. So I think you don't need to really use your imagination to imagine what is inside of those and what is being destroyed. Let's take a look at number 11, because this is really the key for this week. This is base housing. This is the barracks that the soldiers are on. And we're looking here at about 36 containerized living units, they called them. They're just basically portables, ATGO trailers that the troops are in. And you can see in the next slide, they're basically about 26 of the 38 are destroyed here. And the other ones I mean, you'd have to be on the ground, but the ones on the edges look like they're destroyed too. But the ones in the middle are completely destroyed. Were they totally empty, completely empty of soldiers, or are these the 100 casualties that they're talking about? It's still not clear, and the Americans are making it not clear because they're losing the war. And like the Israelis did in Gaza, they believed that if they hid the number of true casualties or release them slowly, release them after the fact, that it would kind of blunt the sharp focus on casualties and whether that means you're winning or losing the war. Let's take a look at 13. This is what the actual housing looks like. This is from the U.S., from a U.S. base in Germany. And they're the exact same trailers, right? 𝐓𝐡𝐞 trailers, one by one after another. And in each room, there's soldiers' barracks, bunks. That's where the soldiers are. That's where they are when they're not on post, on station. So just wanted you to see what it actually looks like. One soldier from 𝐓𝐻𝐿 𝐓𝐡𝐞, he spoke to the Washington Post the other day, and he said that he had previously deployed to 𝐓𝐻𝐿 𝐓𝐡𝐞. And he said that in early March, during an intense exchange of missile strikes between the U.S. and Iran, a direct hit on the hardened barracks at Camp Arif-Jan in Kuwait, the U.S. Army facility in Kuwait, broke through the layers of protection, destroying about half of the structure, the soldier said. Similar heavy destruction has occurred at U.S. military facilities across the region, he said. So now we're getting soldiers as the ones who are telling us the story. And his pull quote here is, "We're getting beat up across the board." All of the bases across the Middle East are being hit. The soldiers know it, obviously. You could hear at the end of that first video that I showed you, you could hear the chaos of the soldiers trying to find out who's alive or not on those strikes. So 𝐓𝐻𝐿 𝐓𝐡𝐞 in Jordan hitting these base housing, a significant escalation by Iran, tactical escalation. These bases are being destroyed, and now the places where the soldiers are being destroyed. And on these bases that are not near cities, the soldiers stay on the base. In the cities, in the more urban areas where their bases, we know because the U.S. told us that they moved the soldiers from these kind of containerized housing units on base, off the base, to use human shields in the cities, to put them in hotels behind civilians, hoping that they wouldn't be targeted behind civilians. So that just gives you a little wrap of 𝐓𝐻𝐿 𝐓𝐡𝐞. Let's take a look at the maps again that we're more familiar with from the Strait of Hormuz. Again, the Strait of Hormuz is an issue this week. The numbers are way down through the strait, and there have been a number of statements this week about the danger of traveling through the southern route through the Omani waters, that is the U.S. Route. And the IRGC said, in one example, said a few hours ago, 2 oil tankers deceived by American intelligence agencies attempted to pass through a minefield south of the Strait of Hormuz and exploded, resulting in a large fire. The IRGC Navy declares with certainty that the Strait of Hormuz is extremely unsafe due to the crimes of the American child-killing army, and it is completely closed. The strait is completely closed. Until the aggressions of the criminal America cease, it is impossible to export even a single drop of chemical fertilizers, of oil, or of gas from this region. So, and again, the U.S. route on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday of last week, 0 crossings. So Iran has the ability to block the strait. If you want to go through the Iranian route, you can exit through the strait as normal, but the U.S. is prohibiting their allies from doing that. And you can see on this map all of the countries impacted by it: UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait's up at the top, Saudi as well. Greatly impacted by this. This is where 35% of the world's seaborne oil crosses through the Strait of Hormuz. And when we get a little later into the show, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the Bab el-Mandeb Strait that is also closed, closing both choke points and sending ships around Africa. Let's take a look at number 15. People like these from space photographs. Again, this is another astronaut photographs. Gives you an idea of the concentration of population along the desert, along the coast of the Persian Gulf, in from the desert. And you can see the distance for Iran to target each of these countries. I say it every week, but it's the key element of this war, and it can go on forever because they are short-range attacks. They're highly precise, and when they're attacks executed from a distance this short, missile defense is not as capable as it is with longer distances to prepare. Let's take a look at 16. This is the Strait of Hormuz from a different angle that you're seeing here. That on the upper right is the Iranian coast. Again, you can see the mountains. They have every military asset. I talked about that a couple shows ago. Every military asset from the topographical realities of the strait. But you can see how tiny the Strait of Hormuz is, and it's shallow water, as we saw in that previous map. Let's take a look at 17, because this was a psychological operations that the IRGC put out. This is the Marine Expeditionary Unit, the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit, on board the USS Tripoli, which is an amphibious assault machine that assault ship that just actually fled from the battle space after this photo was taken. And they docked yesterday in Japan. So the Marine Expeditionary Unit that was going to raid all these islands and was going to go get the nuclear dust, as the president calls it, they are now docked in Japan. But the Iranians wanted the U.S. to know that the Marine Expeditionary Unit ground troops were under surveillance. The IRGC Navy said the movements and equipment of the American terrorist army are under surveillance of naval units of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Americans are getting closer to the 0 hour for operations against CENTCOM naval units in regional waters. Just wait. That was the statement from the IRGC. Let's take a look at the next map, because we're going to go for some missile strikes here. And I just wanted to bring up these core bases in these core 4 countries that you're looking at here. And this is the United States security architecture that was established. I mean, it began to be established in the first Gulf War in 1991, but really this is a product of the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq and the so-called global war on terror. And these bases have all been battered from the first days of the war. And we know from when we did have satellite imagery, before the U.S. censored commercial satellite imagery, we know that destruction on these bases is significant. And these are the targets that you're going to see in these next series of operations. We can go to number 19. This is a launch from just the day before yesterday. These are Khyber Sheikhan medium-range ballistic missiles, Fatah 110. Short-range solid fuel ballistic missiles. Like I said, you can always tell the solid fuel by that white, opaque, and lasting exhaust that we see there. And the difference between a solid fuel and a liquid fuel is its readiness. The solid fuel can be launched without being filled. It could be, and there you see a liquid one. You can see the clear difference there in the Goddard there. And then back again to solid fuels. So the solid fuels are easier to store. They're safe to store. They can store them underground. There's a Shahed 136 drone that you can see. Again, drone swarms being set up. These are called waves. And like I said on last show, a wave is not equal to a salvo. A wave is a series of operations, sometimes spread out over hours, sometimes coordinated all at once. But the terminology that they're using is waves, but these are not, a wave is not an individual salvo. It is a series of salvos, as you see here with the multiple launch systems that we are watching. And note, we're going to see that this week in particular. I'll show you on the next one. Let's go to 20, because you can see the same thing. This is, again, solid fuel. And then you're going to see an Imad, which has a heavy warhead, like comparable to a Mark 84 2,000-pound bomb that dropped on civilians in Gaza every day for the last 1,021 days. So you can see the both the stores, the stockpiles, the readiness, all of that, all those numbers that we were told, they're all a lie. They're all not true. And we're seeing now that these weapons can be deployed from all over. These can be deployed by road mobile trucks. They could be truck launched, but you see how they're blurring they've started to blur the launch method of all of these. So we can't tell if they're silos or if they're truck launched. And that's interesting. See there, you see a liquid fuel. Again, it's very clear the difference between the two. And liquid fuel is problematic. You have to fill it up. You have to take crews, have to go out and fill it up on the launch pad, which takes time. It's dangerous, and you can't store them. You can't store them underground with liquid fuel because they corrode and they can explode. So solid fuel is battle ready, and that is what we're seeing in these rounds, presumably many fired from silos that were dug out during the period of pause. Let's take a look at the next slide. Is just one of those Fatah 110s to show you. And there's a series of this rocket, this missile, the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 and the Fatah 110 and the Fatah 313 is shorter range that they use on shorter range operations. Let's take a look at number 22. This week, the Americans were trying to tell the Washington Post that of 8,500 drones and missiles that have been fired at the region, an American source who obviously wouldn't put his name on record because it's pretty embarrassing, he said that 8,400 out of 8,500 missiles have been detected. I mean, there's a little wiggle room in the language that they use, but to claim a 98.8 interception rate on maneuverable re-entry vehicle missiles is absurd. Even the Israelis were talking 65% on those missiles, even by their most advanced air defense systems. So the Americans are just telling outrageous lies as if they think nobody understands what they're talking about. So let's take a look at 23. Are we at 23? Yeah, there's some Shahed 136 drone launches. You can see they're rocket boosted, so they're fired off a simple rail, as you see there. Very easy to set up, takes 2 minutes. It's got a rocket booster that fires it up to speed. You can see that once the rocket booster is expended, it's dropped to get rid of its excess weight. And for the long-term flights, I mean, these drones can target Israel. They have 2,000 kilometer plus range, depending on how they're structured. And they're highly precise. They are satellite tracked, and they're very precise. We can see in the next slide that the Iranians are using now these matte black ones that are newer models. So we're seeing newer models, and that was something the Iranians said. They were firing their old stuff in the early part of the war. These Shahed 136s, the black matte is better for night flight, and it indicates a more recent batch that is being manufactured. Again, lie that the Americans destroyed the manufacturing base. It's a lie. Let's look at 25. Got a couple more launches here, targeting Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, and Jordan with these ballistic missiles. These were waves 17 through 20 that happened this week. They are now up to wave 26, so multiple in a day, and many dozens in a single. You're going to see here half a dozen just launched simultaneously there of the Fatah 110s. And the Fatah 110s carry a heavy warhead as well for their size. There you see a good shot of it going into space. Let's take a look at 27. Oh, that's the missile. I just wanted to give you guys a good shot of what it looked like because it's always flying. But there's a good Fatah 110 shot as well. Could be a 𝐓𝐡𝐞. Tough to tell with the size, but same type, same family of missiles. There's 3 types, 3 different sizes, 4 different sizes of them. Let's take a look at 27. This is the Arash-2 drone. This is the army, the Iranian army, Artesh. This is their primary weapon. You can see it's also rocket boosted. It's going to drop that rocket booster once it gets up to speed. The Arash-2 has a 2,000 kilometer range and also a heavy warhead, 150 kilo warhead. And these were designed for long range attacks, i.e., they were designed to strike Israel. They can easily strike all of the countries that are far closer than Israel. And we'll see that in this next series. I stuck together the week's worth of Artesh drone operations. and these are them launching all throughout the week. They're up to now 25 stages. They're calling them stages for the Army. And they're a little bit smaller than a wave. The IRGC wave is much larger than the Artesh stages, but it gives you a sense of how both the militaries are operating together. And in their field reports on these, they're very specific about what's being targeted. Camp Arif-Jan in Kuwait, a parking area for helicopters was targeted. A building housing forces in the U.S. terrorist army at Ali al-Jaber base in Kuwait was hit with attack drones. And then they describe what they are. The Arif Jan base is one of the largest centers of deployment of the U.S. forces and headquarters of the U.S. ground force in Southwest Asia. The base is where the U.S. Navy and Air Force helicopters, including attack helicopters, are hosted. And the Americans said that they lost multiple attack helicopters. Well, they said to sources said, nobody will go on record telling the truth, that a bunch of their attack helicopters were destroyed on the ground this week. Let's take a look at 29. This is an anti-ship cruise missile fired by the Army. Can't get a good sight of it because they want the operational security about the launch method and the missile itself that's being used. But we know they have a strong supply of anti-ship cruise missiles. These are being fired at the U.S. Navy. This was in the 13th stage. The Army fired coast-to-sea cruise missiles targeting an enemy aggressor vessel in the northern Indian Ocean. So we're seeing the ships of the U.S. being fired at. That's something that Trump confirmed too. He said they're being fired at hundreds of times, but you never know where he gets his numbers. Let's take a look at number 30, downing drones. Something that we do here on this show every week. There goes another 30 plus million MQ-9 Reaper drone, and there it is on the ground. In case some people say that the reticle, watching the reticle and watching the drone explode isn't real. They showed you on the ground that they're all very real. Now let's take a look at some battle damage assessments, because these are the things that are also match exactly with the targeting that the Iranians say what they're targeting, and then we see it sure enough within a day or two on satellite images. Let's take a look at 31. This is the Al Udeid Air Base. This is the main air base for CENTCOM's forward headquarters positions, and you can see significant warehouse there just destroyed, and maybe it was empty. That's what they want you to believe. This is also the home of the Combined Air Operations Center, which was rendered inoperable. That's their command center for the wars in Iraq, in Afghanistan, Syria. It was rendered inoperable by strikes in March. And these are, let's look at 32 is in the desert. This is Tower 22. Again, we're circling base housing there. You can see 8 base housing units there. This is Tower 22, right at the border of Jordan, Syria, and Iraq in the desert. So the troops here didn't leave this base and go and stay in high-rise hotels. Or maybe they did, but there's still people on this base. Maybe they went to Amman to run away. There's a lot of troops that have fled the region and are fleeing the region still this week. So this is Tower 22. Let's take a look at the next two. You can see here the base housing again. And then if we look at the next slide, we can see the complete elimination of one of those. And there's various other satellite images. Again, we could do a whole show on satellite images. If we had 2 hours, we could do that. But I just picked some of the most clear-cut ones, but there's literally a dozen more that I could have brought on this show. Let's take a look at 35, because they're also firing on air defense arrays. So this is Erbil Airport. This is a major U.S. base in northern Iraq, in Kurdish held territory in northern Iraq. And those Patriot launchers are the launchers I broke down last week that fire $4 million each interceptors, and you can see there that has been targeted and destroyed. If we look at 36, this is the same base battling drones. This is a counter rockets, artillery, and mortars unit, a CRAM unit, firing essentially heavy guns to try to stop the drones from coming in. The drones are targeting them. Those are Army drones that I showed you be launched, and also Shahed 136s by the IRGC. Let's take a look at the next one. This is a base in Abu Dhabi. This is the Zayed military city, a sweeping multifunctional army complex designed for ground forces, characterized by vast rows of ground force warehouses, troops, barracks, training ranges, and administrative command facilities, according to them. You can see three major installations, the three largest on the base. If we go to the next slide, you can see that they have been removed, and we'll get better and better satellite imagery of this in the coming days. You already stuff that I covered last week. There's more satellite imagery of it this week that's even more clear. So as the weeks go on, it just gets better and better. The optics of the battle damage assessments that are clearly successful. And there was, like I said, many other that I could have shown, a dozen others that I could have shown. But those give you good examples of the state of the war between the US and Iran. I'm going to go to Yemen here briefly for a moment, because Yemen has this week announced a siege for a siege, an eye for an eye, a blockade for a blockade against the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, who attacked the Sana'a airport, the capital of Yemen, when an Iranian delegation was arriving. They bombed the runways and spent tens of millions of dollars launching long-range aerial launched cruise missiles, because they were too scared of Yemeni air defenses to actually fly over. But right away, that was 2 weeks ago, right away, the Yemenis said that they were going to respond, and they have. Let's take a look at the maps here just to show what we're talking about. Again, we've been focused on the Strait of Hormuz for the past while, but going back to our October 2023 roots of the resistance report, the Yemenis joined Al-Aqsa flood virtually immediately and blockaded the Red Sea. And so the port in Eilat that you can see up there on the top right, if you follow the Red Sea up to the top past Saudi Arabia, if you hang a right on that one fork, you end up at Eilat, which was a major Israeli port that is completely bankrupt now and basically non-existent. And if you go up to the left, you go up to the Suez Canal, which is problems for very large crude carriers. They cannot go through the shallow channel. There's also payments through the Suez Canal that have to be paid, interestingly, because there's a big fuss over the Strait of Hormuz tolls, but the tolls that Egypt charges are seen as legitimate tolls. So let's take a look at the next map, because the Bab el-Mandeb, you can see it from a couple different angles here. So this was ships coming in yesterday. The Washington Post reported that a large cargo ship bound for Saudi Arabia was turned back Tuesday by Yemeni rebels, one of 7 vessels that have been reversed course. And as of reporting this today on Thursday, there's now up to 11 ships that have been turned back, according to analysis by maritime firm Lloyd's List. And Lloyd's List is an underwriter, their insurance company, that track this closely, because this sends insurance rates for the ships so prohibitively high that the route around Africa becomes the normalized. And again, the World Bank indicated a global recession will come out of this if this continues. They said this is the largest oil shock ever recorded in the history of oil, and the blockade of the Red Sea shuts down the Yanbu port that Saudi has a pipeline that goes to Yanbu in the Red Sea and offloads several million barrels of oil. Some say up to 7. Seems like around 4 is more the realistic flow rate. So another 4 million barrels off the market, because of this blockade of the Bab el-Mandeb. Let's take a look at the next slides, because you can see here, just wanted to show you what it looks like from space, because you can see the Bab el-Mandeb is easy for the Yemeni armed forces to secure. It's just like it shares many of the same characteristics of the Strait of Hormuz. It's tiny. It's right along Yemeni waters. It's on a coast. Yemen has coastal areas that have high ground firing positions all up the coast of the Red Sea, throughout that southern Red Sea area. And so it's very difficult for ships to make it through. And this is a photo also. These photos are taken by digital SLRs. So these are not trick photos. These are actually just cameras being snapped by astronauts, and gives you a really great view beyond the maps of what this closing this choke point looks like. Let's take a look at the last one here. You can see how the strait looks from Djibouti, looking east. That is Yemen under the cloud there that you're seeing, and that is the Bab el-Mandeb Strait that's right in front of that cloud. It's a tiny waterway that is easy to close. And the Yemeni said that the first principle was the Yemeni armed forces announced a maritime ban on the Saudi enemy based on the principle of siege for siege, which will take effect from the moment this statement is announced. And indeed, that is what happened. And just before we go, I want to just touch on Gaza and Palestine in general. Hamas elected Halil al-Hayya this week. He was elected through the structure of the Hamas movement to the chief of the Politburo, of their political bureau, and the election took place in 4 places, as always, under the Hamas structure. It took place in the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, in prison, and in exile. Those are the 4 main tent poles for the movement. And so Halil al-Hayya is not a surprise to anybody close following this. He was close with Sinwar. He was sent abroad in 2022 to do the diplomatic work, to do to effectively become the lead diplomat for Hamas, and he was the lead negotiator. Israel tried to kill him in Qatar. They killed his son. That made it 4 sons of his that have been killed by the Israelis, and many other family members in massacres trying to kill him since he began in Hamas in the beginning. He's one of the founding members of Hamas. He's also a graduate of the Islamic University of Gaza, First Intifada. He has that whole trajectory of the building of the Hamas movement into what it is today. It is under a lot of pressure, but the movement is able to hold elections in those 4 key constituencies: Gaza, the West Bank, prison, and exile, and come up with a new leadership. And Halil al-Hayya said that the first thing he said upon elected in his speech, he saluted the countries that, of course, that supported Palestine, like the resistance always does. He saluted the distinguished position of supporting, backing, and defending Palestinian rights. And we specifically mentioned the brothers in Yemen, in Lebanon, in Iraq, and Iran who participated with and supported us with their blood and with their weapons. We are confident that the path of our people's resistance, which we are honored to belong to, is guaranteed victory no matter how long or short the time. We are proceeding on that pledge, keeping before our eyes the service of our great people and the preservation of its rights and sacrifices. The storms of injustice will not defeat us, and we will not bargain over the soil of our blessed Palestine. So that is the statement from Halil al-Hayya, signaling a continuity within the Hamas political movement. And of course, his close ties to Sinwar gives him a strong base within the Qassam brigades as well, which is the true center of gravity of the Hamas movement. So this has been the Resistance Report on day 1021 of Israel's genocide.
Thank you so much, John. Oh God.
Yeah. That was an incredible report, John. And there's some breaking news. Supposedly, another exclusive story from Barak Ravid at Axios. Apparently, Donald Trump was on the phone to him and said that he is close to making a decision on a massive attack on Iran, strikes that would be bigger than the ones carried out during Operation Epic Fury. Quote, "I'm considering a massive attack bigger than ever before. I'm close to making a decision. We are all set for it," the president said. And
all
Trump
set,
said,
though, that's doing a lot of work, because they're not all set. They're in a worse position than they were when they arrived. Their air defenses are not able to fight a heavy war. They don't have the personnel in the region. They've been pulling people out of the region. I don't think they're ready for that. But what's Barak Ravid's record? He's like 1 for 1,000. So I think.
Well, we can assume that he really spoke to Trump and Trump really said this to him. I think that much we can believe. The question is, what's behind it? It seems like on the one hand, it's another big bluff, but on the other hand, they may try it because it's,
they're reckless,
escalation after escalation.
And they're embarrassed that they've been so humiliated. And have underestimated Iran's capabilities, not just over the last, 5 months, but over the last, 50 years. Yeah. It's pretty extraordinary. And so, I mean, this is a reckless, irrational, dangerous administration, like all other U.S. administrations have been. But they're also extremely unpredictable and they lie all the time. So,
there's a couple of other interesting things in this interview that we'll just throw out there and see if you have thoughts on it. He says, Israel, this is Donald Trump, quote, Israel would join in 2 minutes if I asked them to, but we don't need anybody. And he also said there would be consequences for Israel joining the strikes, hinting at Iranian retaliation. And I find this really interesting, and you can file this under every accusation as a confession.
Yeah.
Trump says that Iranians want to negotiate but are not ready to make a deal at the moment. They haven't received enough pain yet, he said. I think it really is the other way around.
Yeah,
the United
no kidding.
States, at some level, they understand that they've been defeated and they cannot force the Strait of Hormuz open. They cannot force Iran's surrender, but they have not yet fully absorbed that lesson.
Yeah. I mean, Israel is saying the same thing too, right? They're saying that they don't need the U.S. to defend itself anymore, and I know. Yeah, it's like, well, let's
Bezalel Smotrich, the Israeli finance minister, the fanatical settler extremist, said the other day on Israeli TV, he said, we don't need to enter the war. We're happy with the U.S. and Iran fighting each other. So, I mean, that's incredible. It's just,
it's an admission that they know exactly what's in store for them.
Yeah, and that they're happy to see the U.S., sustain losses basically for them.
Yeah, losses that at some point are going to call into question this entire architecture of security, because these bases are being destroyed. We know from the previous rounds that they were being destroyed already, and now each and every day it's getting more and more. At some point, the question will be very clear to people. Do we rebuild these bases? Is this something they're walking themselves right into this situation, which is what Iran said right from the start. Iran is doing exactly what Iran said they were going to do right from the start.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, that energy crisis is inching closer and closer. Gas prices, gasoline prices,
$100 a barrel now.
Yeah, and gasoline prices have shot up again in the United States after falling for a few weeks. They are back up above $4 a gallon. National average, much, much higher in many places.
Yeah, it's like $7 a gallon here in California.
And the Strategic Petroleum Reserve is heading towards zero. So we're in for very, very turbulent times ahead. And to quote another very well-respected commentator on these issues, no end in sight.
All right. Well, I guess we can see what happens and reconvene next week about the geopolitical dumpster fire that the U.S. and Israel is continuing to engage in. Let's, Ali, I know you wanted to talk a little bit about what you've been following in terms of Zohran Mamdani, the mayor of New York City's recent comments about Netanyahu and what it signifies.
Yeah, and so for people who are just joining us, a reminder that you're watching and listening to the Electronic Intifada live stream. I'm Ali Abunimah here with Nora Barrows-Friedman and Jon Elmer. And yes, a lot of people have been following the video that Zohran Mamdani, the mayor of New York City, put out. Of course, he ran on the promise of arresting Benjamin Netanyahu, who is wanted by the ICC. And he put out this video just the other day. I think we should watch it and then we'll react to it and share some thoughts. Let's play it.
Benjamin Netanyahu is a war criminal, the architect of a horrific genocide against the Palestinian people. He is responsible for the killing of more than 73,000 people, for the maiming of tens of thousands of children as those who survive undergo amputation without anesthesia, for the targeting of neonatal hospitals and maternity care centers, denying newborns even the chance to live, for the countless people he starved as he blocked food and humanitarian aid from reaching them, for the gunning down of hundreds of aid workers and journalists. And just last month, the UN confirmed that Palestinian children continue to be deliberately targeted and killed by Israeli armed forces, more than 8 months after the so-called ceasefire. The list goes on and on, all as we, as Americans, pay for the bombs that do the killing. There is a reason the International Criminal Court issued a warrant for his arrest. As human beings, we have spent generations building a shared understanding that there are crimes so grave they offend all of humanity. Anyone, with their eyes, with their heart, with their conscience, should recognize the devastation he has wrought and understand that he belongs before a court of law. As I've said, I agree with the ICC that Benjamin Netanyahu should be arrested and tried for his crimes, as I do for anyone else charged by the ICC. My administration has reviewed every avenue available under applicable law to determine whether New York City could execute the International Criminal Court's arrest warrant if Benjamin Netanyahu came here. It is clear that we do not have the independent legal authority to enforce this warrant. The federal government, however, does, and I call on them to join the ICC and execute this warrant. And I want to be equally clear. Benjamin Netanyahu is not welcome in New York City, nor is any other war criminal at large. While we cannot end the genocide on our own, we can decide whether our silence will become another weapon, and we can examine every tool we have to defend the humanity and dignity of all people. That is my commitment to you.
General thoughts, Ali.
I think it's extraordinary for a senior elected politician, not senior, he's the mayor of New York City. Yes, it's a prominent role, but highly prominent, highly visible public official to make such a statement, to say that Benjamin Netanyahu is the architect of a genocide, is a war criminal, and he should be arrested. And I think it sets the standard for politicians, not just around the United States, but around the world. And I'll say some more about that a little bit later. But what puzzles me is that there has been a lot of vociferous, I don't know if it's, I think it's a minority, but still vociferous criticism. And of course, I've criticized Zohran Mamdani for many things, and I will continue to do so. And it's a well-worn list that he kept on the ultra-Zionist NYPD Commissioner Jessica Tisch, that he has appeared to lend his aura to war criminals like Barack Obama, totally unnecessary and unhelpful, that he's accepted calls from Kamala Harris. He's, of course, a member of the Democratic Party, and he should be criticized for all of those things. But people want me to be mad at this statement. I'm not. I think this is a great statement, and it sets a standard. That's how I feel about it. And of course, I don't think it was ever very realistic that he could arrest Benjamin Netanyahu. I think it was good that he stated that as a goal. I think he probably did ask the New York City Law Department to examine if there was a legal way to do it, and they probably told him there wasn't. But even if there was a legal way, what are people expecting? Are they expecting the NYPD to engage in a shootout with the U.S. Secret Service and the FBI and the Israeli security who would be protecting Netanyahu? So it's just very strange that that this is what people have chosen to be upset about. This is a historic statement in many ways. That's my view.
Yeah, I mean, he's right. I mean, this is a federal issue. The federal police should arrest Israel's prime minister,
Which he said,
Benjamin
that the
Netanyahu,
federal government should arrest Netanyahu.
They should do it. There is he is a war crimes fugitive. There is an open indictment and warrant for his arrest. And it's up to the will of these legal authorities to do the right thing. And I think what Mamdani said, I agree. It sets the standard. I think that this is now the bar that other mayors, congresspeople, senators should aspire to. I mean, that statement went viral. It said things that we've all been saying. It is not the be all end all of political, aspirations, but it is a standard that should now be met and elevated to actual material action, to drag these war crimes fugitives into The Hague. And I know that the U.S. is now trying to pull out of the ICC and trying to denigrate the jurisdiction of international legal bodies. But it's still here. We should still be able to use it to prosecute these genocidal maniacs who are fugitives from international law.
Yeah, it's just the kind of statement that is so basic that I think a lot of people were just like, why did we not hear that in October of 2023? From like speaking to you from Canada, from a country that doesn't really have anything at stake in this, war. It was just amazing that no politician, not one, could make this points of fact that he made. Just the basic points of fact, just like to say that you've been watching what we all are watching, that you're part of the same world that we're all a part of. And it just never happened. And it was just all one of the things that was really one of the many things that was shocking about this genocide is that just the most basic, like the ICC thing, trying to arrest Netanyahu, that is one thing, but even just the plain speaking from institutions, from elected officials, the absence of that, I think, is what is really shows in that video when you see it and you see like, hey, we've never, first of all, those are all basic points, right, about the genocide. That we just have never seen that before is just a damning indictment. And one of the darkest aspects of this genocide is that nobody in these positions acted like they cared, even if they were faking it. They didn't believe that that was necessary.
And the effect it's had is extraordinary. When I looked earlier this morning, just on Twitter X, that video had 83 million views. It had 2.4 million views on YouTube, 1.3 million likes on Twitter. And that's just the original copies on the official accounts. It's, of course, been copied and posted probably millions more times and broadcast around the world. And the impact of that just cannot be underestimated and should not be dismissed, even if you are critical, as I am and have been, of Zohran Mamdani for many other things. I think it's just so dismissive of the efforts that people have been making at the grassroots for years to push politicians and push the political system as John said, just acknowledge these basic realities, and the fact that now the mayor of New York City, traditionally a position where you have had the most fanatically pro-Israel politicians in the world occupy that post, to be able to say these things is not a small thing, and it is significant to Palestinians. Even Palestinians who are critical of Mamdani, including Palestinian activists in New York, who have rightly pushed him and constantly push him. It is significant. And if people want to denigrate that achievement, they also denigrate the work people have been doing at the grassroots to change the discourse and change the public standards. And I just want to again, keeping in mind what Nora, what you and John said, compare and contrast. Okay, just keep in mind Mamdani calling Netanyahu a war criminal, the architect of the genocide, and calling on the United States government to arrest him. Well, let's take a look at the new British government. The new Prime Minister Andy Burnham. Let's look at this, Tamara, this article from The Guardian. Many people have seen this report. Andy Burnham apologizes for Labour's stance on Gaza and says it didn't get it right. In other words, that the Labour
shooting
Party,
and crying.
The Labour Party wasn't harsh enough on Israel. Well, what does the Guardian report? It says, the Prime Minister in waiting, now Prime Minister, because this was a few days ago, the Prime Minister in waiting told The Guardian he would put more pressure on the Israeli government, including through further sanctions on individuals and entities, as well as a potential ban on the trade of goods with illegal settlements. The most minimal, insignificant measures that should have been done decades ago still haven't been done, and which don't actually address the genocide. Because, yes, there should be a ban on settlement goods, but what does that have to do with the genocide in Gaza? And then they have this quote from Andy Burnham. He says, I know many people feel that at the start of Israel's military action in Gaza, it is July 2026, and he's saying Israel's military action in Gaza, not genocide, not war crimes. So at the start of Israel's military action in Gaza, my party didn't get it right, and I'm sorry about that. The response has too often not been good enough. We need to do better. Just pablum with no specifics. Where is Andy Burnham's call on someone who actually has the power to arrest Netanyahu if he were to set foot in the UK or to pass through a British airspace? Andy Burnham has the power right now to order the Royal Air Force to stop aiding and abetting the genocide with surveillance flights and intelligence and so on. And they're not even doing that. And then let's look at the statement from Ed Miliband, the new British Foreign Secretary, who says, he put up this statement when he was appointed. It is a great honor and privilege to have been appointed by the Prime Minister to serve as Foreign Secretary. My parents came to Britain as Jewish refugees from the Nazis. Then he says, from Russia's illegal war in Ukraine to conflict in the Middle East, time and again we have seen consequences of a more dangerous world. So he characterizes Russia's invasion of Ukraine as illegal, but in the Middle East, it's just a conflict. No genocide there, no war crimes, no crimes against humanity. And then further down in his statement, he says, his job will also mean working tirelessly. You remember working tirelessly? Kamala Harris and AOC working tirelessly for a ceasefire. So Ed Miliband tells us that he'll be working tirelessly to seek a sustainable peace in Palestine and Israel, including an end to the terrible suffering of the people of Gaza and security for the people of Israel. So no mention of genocide, no mention of why people in Gaza are suffering or who is causing their suffering. And then he pledges security to the perpetrators of the genocide.
Mm-hmm.
So this is what the newly improved British government, which is contrite about Gaza, is saying. And people want me to be mad about what Zohran Mamdani said.
Right.
Doesn't compute in my mind.
No, that is full on depravity. Shameless depravity. Just absolute.
But keep pushing Zohran Mamdani. That's what I've said from the beginning. I'll keep saying it. Politicians are not our friends. They are there to represent people. They are there to represent what's right. And it's okay to say, this is a good thing, he said. This is an incredibly strong statement that sets a standard, not just for other American politicians, but for Andy Burnham, for every European government, for every government around the world. This should be the minimum. And our demand should not be, why isn't Zohran Mamdani having a shootout with the Secret Service to try to capture Benjamin Netanyahu? It should be, why are the governments who actually have the power to stop the genocide, to stop the weapons, to stop the trade, the greedy trade that fuels Israel's murderous machine, why are they doing nothing? Why are they doing nothing? Put your anger where it deserves to be.
Yeah,
come on.
No kidding. John, anything you want to say about Mark Carney in these recent days?
No, but I agree in general that this is a baseline that should be followed by institutions, politicians. This should be the low bar to entry into this, is that you can't, no matter where you are on the political spectrum, that you can't observe what's happened in Gaza for the last 3 years and say that this is a world that we all want to share, that this is an ideology that we are going to support rampage across the Middle East. Like, it just seems like such a low bar. And
it's such a low bar that when a lawmaker, head of a city, just says facts, it's a relief. It's a relief. And I mean, it should be the standard. This should just be basic. The bar is so basic.
To be a human, like,
yes. Yeah, exactly. To recognize what's actually happening in Palestine, and to call it out. All right. So much more we could always talk about, but let's save that for next week. Let's take a look at the website. There are so many features that we've published. I read the one by Hassan Herzallah about the yellow line and the creeping encroachment of stealing of Gaza's land by the Israeli army. Ali, what have you been reading this week? Oh, you're muted.
It's notable that we have published really a slew of incredible news stories from our writers in Gaza, including Dunya Abu-Sitteh, who we've had on the live stream many times, about the constant danger people face in Gaza, and by Khulud Sleiman, who is writing about the situation, how the slow dismantling of UNRWA is affecting services, vitally needed services for Palestinians, and of course is affecting the workers of UNRWA who are no longer have jobs. So that's a couple of them. We had last week's discussion was really interesting and fascinating on this show, and Eli Gerzon wrote about that. You remember the whole discussion we had last week about Roqayah and Rahm Emanuel, and so some really interesting observations in that piece. Does Israel have a right to defend itself? So that's a really great piece by Eli Gerzon. Again, emphasizes one thing it really emphasizes is that all these politicians are following the public lead. To the extent that they are shifting, it is because of years and years of grassroots work. People, for example, the last week we talked about the unprecedented number of democratic lawmakers who voted to end military aid to Israel. And well, some of the leading ones who, the senior Democrats who did that, like the Democratic whip Catherine Clark of Massachusetts, people have been staging demonstrations outside her home, outside her office throughout this genocide, demanding a stronger position, demanding she take a position. And the fact that she has is a credit to them. So this is what we need to keep our eye on.
Yeah, thanks for that. And thank you, Ellie, for writing that up. Also, Tamara has a piece right there on the front page. Israel withholds water from Jordan as it takes center stage in U.S.-Iran war. And this is a fascinating and important bit of analysis on Jordan's role right now as the junior partner in Western hegemony in West Asia. And it's fascinating. And I just wanted to thank Tamara for diving into that, how Jordan is sacrificing its own people to sustain its partnership. Yeah.
It's another example of no matter how much you bend over backwards for the empire,
right,
you do not really get rewarded for it. And Jordan is certainly not in a great position now, having become the focus of attacks as U.S. assets are moved there. Of course, Jordan doesn't. Jordan's position is that there are no U.S. bases in Jordan, but it doesn't deny that there are U.S. forces in Jordan. So call that what you like. But as U.S. forces are moved there, Jordan is in the firing line, and Israel is adding to the pressure by slowing the supply of water in what is one of the world's most water-starved countries. So really interesting piece of analysis from Tamara Nassar.
Incredible. And so much more. I know our colleague Dave Cronin also published something. So yeah.
And yeah, Dave, of course, on the EU beat and digging up the dirt with the Freedom of Information requests. And I did a fascinating interview, which we've posted separately on the Electronic Intifada YouTube channel with Omar Shakir, the executive director of the human rights group Dawn, and Tariq Raouf, who is one of the co-founders of the group's Taxpayers Alliance Against Genocide. And they have just filed a lawsuit in federal court against the Trump administration because of the sanctions that the Trump administration has imposed on ICC judges and prosecutors, on Francesca Albanese, the UN Special Rapporteur, and on 3 prominent Palestinian human rights groups, the Palestinian Center for Human Rights, Al-Mizan and Al-Haq. And they argue that these sanctions are actually a violation of the rights of US citizens because they, as American citizens and US-based human rights groups, have had to stop working with these groups to compile evidence of Israeli war crimes to share with the ICC, because under a Trump executive order, US citizens could face up to 20 years in prison and $1 million in fines for cooperating with these sanctioned bodies, which is a violation of the First Amendment. And we actually just have a little clip from that interview that we wanted to show. Excellent. This is Tariq Raouf from Taxpayers Alliance Against Genocide.
Since these executive orders, we've completely paused all of our work, and it breaks my heart, honestly, because my family members were amongst those killed at places like the GHF.
Tariq, what would it mean to you and to TAG to win this lawsuit?
It would mean that Americans like myself could continue doing their work with international organizations and foreign nationals that know how to try and hold entities like the US accountable for their crimes. Winning something like this would mean not only that would Palestinians be able to seek justice for the way that the United States has brought so much terror and violence against us, but sanctions aren't only about not working with the ICC specifically on things regarding to Palestine, right? the United States is guilty for violence across the globe in multiple countries. So winning a case like this would mean that multiple different people from different nationalities can try and hold the US accountable for the crimes that they commit in other nations where the Rome Statute applies. And for me personally, it means that I can finally try to get justice for the 49 family members that the United States killed.
Yeah, he's extraordinary. And
it's an extraordinarily important lawsuit for defending free speech for everyone. And you can listen to the whole interview on the YouTube channel. You can see that Americans could face prison for speaking out. And you can read the article and watch the video on the Electronic Intifada website. The article is called Lawsuit Challenges Trump Threat to Imprison Americans for Gaza Advocacy. So please do check that out, as well as all the other incredible journalism, analysis, and features by our writers in Gaza and our colleagues around the world.
Thank you for doing that. And as always, let's thank people who are supporting this project and making sure that this publication is staying afloat in these extremely turbulent times.
Yeah, we really do owe thanks to all of our viewers, listeners, and readers, because you're the ones who make this work possible. And particularly those who have really stepped up with a monthly gift of almost any size. It really adds up. The power is in numbers, and it really adds up and gives us that stability to make sure we're here day in and day out. And all of this work we do is free for everyone. There's no paywall. You don't have to, there's no paid subscription. This is information, all of Jon's analysis, all those incredible articles, the news that Nora does, everything free for everyone in the world, because our mission is to educate and inform people. And some of the people who make that possible, actually during the show, we had a few gifts, which we're very grateful for. Eric, Barbara, Richard, Margaret, and over the last few days, Adrian and Jonathan, Paulina, Rifat, and Wendy. And some of our monthly donors include Dario, Thomas, Heidi, Mary, James, Andrew, Hamid, Pascal, and Colin. To each and every one of you, and of course those I didn't name, we're so grateful. If you'd like to make a gift now or at any time, go to electronicintifada.net and you can click donate now, or you can find links in the description of the YouTube video. Thank you to each and every one.
Indeed. Thank you all. Again, electronicintifada.net. You can find the links down below this video. I want to thank, of course, Tamara Nassar for producing and directing this show and all of the work she does before and after these live streams. Thank you, Tamara. Thank you, Ellie Gerzon, for social media production. Thanks to Pierre Loisel for radio production. Thank you to all of our colleagues at the Electronic Intifada and our contributors, of course, especially those in Gaza. And on behalf of myself, Jon, Ali, and Tamara, thank you all, and we will see you next week.